Hi, hope you can hear me. As Jessica said, I work at Global Affairs Canada in the Nordic and Polar Relations Division, so we take care of everything Arctic for Global Affairs. For many years, we have supported the Canada-based Indigenous permanent participants at the Arctic Council, and so that was the base of our work. But in 2020, we started expanding our funding to implement the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework, but just the international chapter is what we do. And so we had to expand our work, and thankfully we got access to more funding. And so we have about 5 pillars in our program, and we fund different projects in the Arctic. But one of our new focus was what we call our youth pillar. And so we've really been trying to listen to and consult youth in the Arctic to find out what they want to see being done. And so yesterday, our senior Arctic official, Heidi Coots, had a really informative discussion with all of the panelists here. She really enjoyed it and found that they had a lot of interesting and well thought out things to say. So, and she's committed to, like she said to you guys yesterday, to keep in touch. You can email her and let her know your ideas. So we're really glad that you agreed to attend the conference, and we're looking forward to learning from you. And Global Affairs is happy to support the conference, and especially the participation of these guys who you have on the stage here. So thanks for coming.
So I just wanted to, take the time to have the youth that are here to introduce themselves. But prior to that, just wanted to sort of make people aware that the title, it would probably be more appropriate. It's a conversation among our youth that are interested in everything regarding economic development, social development, effectively what is happening in our communities and our regions. Not necessarily that they are in business, some are, or that they want to get into business, but they definitely want to participate in the development that is happening and ensure that it is being done in a more inclusive way and that development happens responsibly. So I'm going to take the time to allow each person to introduce themselves in order. Blaine?
Hello.
They'll come on automatically.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Blaine Mirasty, Nasika-san. I'm the owner-operator of Cree North Adventures, and it's located in northern Treaty 6, Saskatchewan. In my area, it's a little different in the sense that, we are connected by road to the south, but it is right on the edge of the circumpolar map, and we're right on the edge of the boreal forest. So there are a little bit of differences, but I'll be happy to share more. Thank you.
Hi, Elisapi nguyunga, Iqaluit saya, maligane me Iqanayakna, Nunavut Human Rights Tribunal me Ichivauta nguyunga. My name is Jasmine Redfern. I am a lawyer with Maligane, and I am the chair of the Nunavut Human Rights Tribunal. So I'm looking forward to participating in this discussion, and I've really enjoyed getting to know my colleagues today.
I'm Kurt Deshaw. I'm a recent graduate of the apprenticeship program at a heavy equipment operator school, and I'm very interested in working in the mining sector of Nunavut. I'm very active in wanting to learn more about the background of inclusivity and getting our position, or getting a way to be a voice within the discussion, and seeing everyone here. It's really helpful in making that vision a reality, and I just want to thank the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Kurt.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Pike, owner and principal consultant with Norlogics. This is a company I started when I was in my early 20s. Mostly do advisory work and joint ventures on natural resource development projects in the north, doing some work in Northern Australia as well. this is my last panel as a youth. I'm finishing my PhD in population medicine, which focuses on the impacts of Inuit well-being and mining from the perspective of Inuit employees and their families. So finishing that in the next few weeks, and Jessica said after that, then I'm officially no longer a youth. So I'll finish that, and I'm honored to be here on this youth panel. And I guess getting married in May and having a kid doesn't make me a youth anymore. I don't know, but it's when I got asked to become if I got labeled as a young entrepreneur, I was quite thankful for that for the time being. But anyway, it's been great chatting with everybody, and I might be putting my conclusion out there, but the future is in really good hands with these youth up here as well.
Thank you. Max?
Hi, I'm Max Schiller. I'm Inuk, and I'm a Bachelor of Commerce, major of finance student in Montreal. I'm just really interested in northern development and even entrepreneurship. I'm doing an internship this summer at with a venture capital team in Montreal. So I'm interested in just bringing more Indigenous students and more Indigenous youth into entrepreneurship and just learning about all their ideas. And that's why I'm so excited to be with my fellow Indigenous youth here today.
So wonderful. So I'm going to ask each of the youth here, or each of the individuals, because I'm fully aware that there's, even diverse definitions of youth. Some say 16 to 18, 19, 24, 25, 29, 35.
There we go.
I think the highest youth definition I've seen is 39, and I remember once being interviewed by a newspaper and being called a young, sort of person at 39. I was like, really? I don't feel that young, And my daughter, I can tell you, sort of reminds me quite regularly that I've gotten a lot older since then. So, Max, you've been actually at this conference now, I think this is your third time here. And you're in business, sort of like streaming and working in the venture capital. And you're Inuk, and your family is, very much connected to the north. So I'm curious to, your perspective of where you think Arctic development is going, or Inuit development is going, and how youth, can play such a diverse, role in shaping where that development happens.
Of course. So to get to that question, I believe that youth could play a really important role in Arctic development as when they grow up north or even want to help out up north. They could be pushed really into entrepreneurship and have their ideas brought to light. Because I'm sure there's a lot of young Indigenous, say, students or young Indigenous people up north that have great ideas and could actually help out and express their ideas if they're given the opportunity to. So I think that it's really important to give opportunity to the young Inuit up north and listen to their ideas, provide funding for their ideas, because they might come up with amazing concepts. We just really don't know yet because there's not enough light really shed on their ideas and given the opportunity.
And you're effectively sort of being mentored, like you're going to school and you're having these sort of work experiences. Do you find that sort of approach has been useful? So it's not just sort of going to school and then, taking any job to just help pay. So
yeah, I think that's really helpful when you're a student and you could go actually get work experience and do internships throughout your university career. I think that it's really helpful to meet new people that way, and also, like you said, the mentorships too, just speaking to people on the team and in the industry as well. They give a lot of advice on how to grow and how to actually get better and do more within the industry itself. So it is really important as well to connect youth to a mentor, to other people within the industry to help them really be more successful in their career and actually find what they're passionate about too. Because you could try jobs in different fields, in different industries, right? And actually learn what you enjoy doing and learn how to get better at doing that by getting that professional experience.
So Matthew, you're completing your PhD and you're in business. I'm very curious as to how you chose to sort of do that and your path, towards both that in your career trajectory.
Cool. That's,
That probably takes more than an hour.
That takes more than an hour. I had no intentions of doing a PhD. I was working with the Arctic Council over in Tromsø in 2017, where a friend of mine who is now my advisor is the dean of the Labrador Institute of Memorial University. So over in Tromsø, working with the Indigenous Peoples Secretariat, and because the simple question came up, do you want to do a PhD? I didn't really want to. I just finished a master's degree online, all that stuff. I just kind of wanted that bit of JPF, joy, peace, and freedom. But then, of course, it came with all these funding opportunities and scholarships that are out there for Indigenous people. So it de-risked. We talk a lot about de-risked. So that funding kind of de-risked that decision. At the same time, I was working full-time for Vale in the Voisey's Bay mine, manning Indigenous relations for Canada for them. And I found myself signing off on millions and millions and millions of dollars for contracts for Inuit businesses. And over the 4 years I worked there, I signed off on over $1 billion in contracts. And these are people I've known all my life that are getting these contracts. So I'm like, I can give me 1% of this, and I can go after that opportunity. So you look at the private sector opportunities, you look at the federal government's opportunities with 5%, and you look at the opportunities to partner with some larger firms to create those meaningful partnerships. You'd almost be silly not to jump into it as a young entrepreneur. The education side of it, it's all geared towards improving the quality of life for Inuit, understanding the past impacts of mining, understanding the current impacts of mining, and preparing for the future impacts of mining, because mining is a non-renewable resource. It's going to close. So I'm trying to prevent and plan for the boom and bust scenarios for Inuit regions, particularly in Nunatsiavut, where it's a one mine. Voisey's Bay is the only mine there, due to close in 2034. Takes 10 to 15 years to get a new mine operational. 1 in every 1,000 mineral prospects becomes a producing mine. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen there now. So in between my research, my professional career, I left Vale about a year ago to focus full-time on entrepreneurship. Best decision I made. And just there's so many different opportunities we see in the Arctic. A lot of challenges. You spoke eloquently to those, but I see those as a lot of opportunity that we create those good partnerships that we could, there's an opportunity there to, create some significantly large companies that then can start giving back to the region, start employing and training Inuit, and that's my way of giving back in a way. So it's a long-term vision to have, but then you start thinking, okay, well, we need some funding for this, and okay, let's start a venture capital firm. Let's start bringing in some folks with some deep pockets and make them partners too. So you talked about the fire truck and the shed, and then you need the firefighters, and you need the gear. Well, I see those second, third, and fourth consequences of a decision as opportunities in the north. Is not, can you capitalize on it? Are you willing to put in the work to do it? So that's my long-winded answer that I could still probably write a book on to that question.
No, but it's really important, sort of how even a simple question posed to you can make you kind of rethink, the opportunity, your life decisions, the de-risking, and how important that is in being able to sort of not only understand there's an opportunity, but follow through on that opportunity. And then you signing off on sort of $1 billion of projects and sort of going, hey, I could do that, or at least I could take a little portion of it. And so, and the role models that we have in our communities, and including our youth, are incredibly important, because it allows other youth to sort of see that, hey, well, if Matthew can do it or Max can do it, why can't I? So I want to also, ask Kurt, because Kurt, you came back home to your home community, and you sort of jumped in and took a number of different jobs, and you also got some internship and training and worked with the Inuit organizations and government, And then you went to work at the mine in security, and that was a good paying job. And Kurt, bought his own house as a young man, and his car, and as he's doing great, things. And I'd love to know what made you decide to go back to school, or effectively training school, and into a new career that is, probably back in the resource sector. So, because you by some accounts, of your peers might say, well, you made it, and you're like, no, I want to do more. So what led you to sort of the decision of going back to school?
The reason I went back to school was just, yes, I did feel like I made it in security at the mine I was working with at Baffinland. I was taking home on paper 70, and then minus taxes, it came to about 60. In my mind, that made I made it. But seeing the toys they were playing with, I call them toys, they were 30, 40, 50-ton machines. I was wondering if it was easy or difficult to pursue the licensing to be able to become an operator. And I found out that the union the Baffinland works for, they do an annual training ship with Indigenous, and the union also do train specifically Inuk, but the Inuks do have to live in the territory of Nunavut. Unfortunately, I lived down south in Ottawa, so I made use of the connection to the mine, and I got in connection with the union saying, hey, I'm interested in the Indigenous program. They responded back, yes, we have a pre-apprenticeship program. From there, you can move forward into the apprenticeship program. And during this pre-apprenticeship program, I worked at the LRT in Ottawa, and I got to experience what it was like to drive these 20, 30, 50-ton machines. It turns out it's easy if you're trained properly, and I found out that I really enjoy it, and that's what I want to pursue. I did leave the Baffinland security on good terms, so if this did not go through, I was able to go back on good terms. However, liking the industry, even liking the construction industry as a whole, made me want to pursue being an operator with heavy equipment. So after working on the Ottawa LRT, I got to finish the full apprentice program, and now I'm shooting my resume off to the northern mines. Whether or not I'm able to make use of my newfound knowledge to pretty much take what I learned to field. And sure, I'm now on the looking end, but I'm still very hopeful for my future in the whole construction industry as a whole, because it is a growing industry, and the North needs people to operate this machine, whether it be fully autonomous or not. These machines are very dangerous in the wrong hands, and being trained to operate this machinery is a privilege in of itself, because now I have this knowledge to just go further in life rather than just coasting in security.
Well, it's I think really good to see the diversity in different ways in which you saw that again at your workplace as an opportunity. And just because you didn't live in your home territory, you found other ways in which to sort of like say, hey, well, can I do this? And can you support me so that you could gain the skills and the experience and be able to pursue a brand new career? So, congratulations. So Jasmine, you have, equally a very interesting sort of career trajectory. Having sort of worked as in initially youth advocacy, and then returning back to your home territory and working with the Inuit organizations and social policy development and management, and then returning back to school to study law, and where you've graduated and now sort of, getting some really good, experience in the courts, but also equally, so keenly aware of the need to balance that with the social justice issues that you care about. And Jasmine has also actually participated in some panels and especially the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women Inquiry, and sort of highlighted that resource development can provide benefits and also can provide some negative, unintended consequences, and how to ensure that that development is done in a way that, benefits people with the least amount of negative impact. So I'm kind of curious, and I have a little bit more relationship with Jasmine. I know her life a little bit more than, the others on this panel, because I am her mother, and she's amazing, and she's forging her own path. But nonetheless, those in the room, so what makes you interested in development that is happening in your community and in your region and in the Indigenous sort of world?
I think really, I should say, I mentioned before that I'm a lawyer. I should specify that I'm a criminal defense lawyer. So in my day-to-day work and life, I see a lot of adverse impacts of being left behind, particularly poverty. And we have such a resource-rich territory. There's so much opportunity for us, and I really want to see all of us benefit from that. I think that there's so much opportunity to leverage the resources available to us to try to mitigate some of the harsh realities of the places where we live. And I do see, where people have opportunity, where a household suddenly gets income, all of a sudden they stop being my clients. It makes a really big difference. And similarly, the same thing, through the human rights work that I do, we see a lot of human rights violations. We see a lot of, employment discrimination that happens sometimes at the mines. And I think that really coming together to find a better way to do things can have such immense impacts across our communities. And I think that's really what we all want, right? Is to live well together. And I think that that's possible and achievable. And we just need to have the right relationships and the right conversations to make that happen. And that's why I really value and appreciate work like what Matthew does, is that helps us at least have a starting point for those conversations.
Blaine, I know that you've started your own business, but you're also involved, as you explained to me, in actually working with other nations in developing some economic planning and trying to determine what those opportunities are. And so you come at it from, both a real lived experience, because you're doing it, but also sort of like planning and supporting, sort of other economic opportunities for your people. And I'm absolutely certain that, the recognition of that group is like, how do we make sure that youth are also included? So I'd love to know how that is going.
So for my day job, I work with the Madeleine Travel Council, and I'm tourism manager. So there's 9 reserves within MLTC, and we're doing an online training program for tourism operators. So tourism accelerator program, they learn how to business plan, they learn how to business model canvas, financing, cash flow. And for applicants, we just have an online questionnaire, and just they submit their business idea, we screen, and we go from there. So we're just doing the recruitment process right now. We plan to do our first sessions in about 2 weeks. And the goal is to get a few more youth, and in our case, it's grade 10s and 11s and 12s, up until, 40, I would say, for youth. But we're looking for that age group of people to start business, generate their own source revenue, and just different ideas, might be elder stories, medicine picking. It just kind of depends on the person and their idea.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to open it up and to any of the youth, or any of the panelists that are here. what are the things that are needed to ensure that those who are actually working on development in your communities or in your region, actually include youth in the process? Like, what has worked well or what is not working well, and what are the recommendations that can be considered to be way more inclusive? Anyone? Kurt?
Just going back to when I was living in Iqaluit, the ILDP program, so Inuit Learning Development Program, I find was a huge success. It gave an introduction to youth into the federal sector, into Inuit orgs, and I just couldn't believe that program existed. And it was recommended to me by a family friend, and she reached out to me, and then I talked to Madeleine at the point, and she also recommended me taking on the program. And at the same time of hearing all this, I was just flabbergasted that such a program existed. Sure, I'm not in that field, and I did not enjoy an office environment, but just seeing the program such as that was amazing to hear and experience, and it did give me some very good life experience in just the professional field as a whole. So like programs like ILDP are huge success stories, I find.
And what was really important about that program is that it came with housing.
Yeah.
And without housing, it would have been a massive barrier for the youth who applied for and did that. So, and the fact that also too is that it gave them an experience, short term in different workplaces. And I think everyone in this room, who is older, has recognized the value of sometimes taking a job or a job and experience and realizing it's not a good fit. I mean, that's okay and that's normal. And so opening it up again, so how could the development or governments or Inuit organizations, Inuit development corporations that are working on these, big development plans or seeking to be participating in the development plans, how can they be more inclusive of youth? Jasmine.
I just want to go back to your original question about the inclusion of youth overall and generally, and touching on something that Matthew had said earlier about kind of the definition of youth. I just want to also put in the room that Indigenous peoples, we have a different median age. We're a very young population. And so I hope that you can incorporate that in when you're thinking about inclusion of youth, is we are a younger population. We also tend to have lives that are a little bit more complicated. I just want to explain that, we start our families earlier. We start our careers sooner. And so when you're including youth, what I often see is a call out for youth and the compensation for your time, and sometimes it's up to a week or more of your time, is the possibility of winning a gift card. And if you've got a full-time career, if you've got children, if you've got people depending on you, that's just not adequate. And so that really affects who you're attracting to the tables if you want to talk about inclusion of youth. And so I hope that we can all, when talking about including youth, really think about to what degree are we including youth, how much are we valuing their contributions, and along that line is at what stage are we including youth and asking them to contribute? Are we asking them to kind of rubber stamp an idea that we've already really committed ourselves to, or are we actually open to the ideas that the youth are going to bring to the table? Because like Max was saying, there's untapped potential and all kinds of ideas. Our people have grown up in our communities with our issues, having seen all kinds of initiatives that have worked well and have not worked well. And that naturally breeds creative thinking. And so let's tap into that. Let's get that early so that we can make sure that we're building projects around that innovation and creativity instead of just, trying the same things over again.
So since Jasmine mentioned your name, Matthew, And I'm sure you've come across sort of like those sort of stereotypical sort of mindsets of, you know, especially around Indigenous youth. You know, youth generally, there's a lot of stereotypes, but, you know, I would probably say more so with Indigenous youth or your rural remote. And so, you know, what's your experience been on sort of like the expectations or the approaches, good and bad, that has sort of like, you know, ensured that either Indigenous youth, you know, want to participate or lead to sort of natural exclusion or tokenism?
Yeah, so I guess if you ask me what my specialty is going into these multinational companies or whoever my client is and being the only. Because I'm always going to be the only Indigenous leader within a company, within a management team. The same thing at Valet, and it's the same thing when I worked 7 years at the Muskrat Falls project. Everywhere I went, I was always the only. And my job is to get in and start changing perspectives. You said a great thing, pay people, pay youth. So we had a program in Voisey's Bay where we started meeting with youth at grades 10s, 11s, and 12. And when they hit grade 12, we would bring them to our mine site for 2 days just to see if they like it as a career choice, to give them that option. And we would pay them because we're taking them time. They're actually coming and doing work with us, so why not pay them? We don't believe in free labor. So it was always this early engagement. We talk about early engagement with Indigenous peoples from many aspects. Same thing with our own youth. So bringing them in and having that, exposing them to what the possibilities are. From a management decision, non-Indigenous, non-Inuit level, my key thing was showing them what youth are facing when they go home on their 2-week off rotation. So we talk about housing. We talk about housing's the biggest issue. Housing by far the biggest issue, because once you leave the community, coming back, trying to find housing, it's near impossible to find housing right now. So it's for a lot of youth, it's catching them before they leave the community and go south. One of the biggest exports of northern Canada is youth. And I see it in my research right now where, and it's one of these things I'm going to dig more into, is all these fly-in, fly-out mining operations. What's happening is Inuit get preference for hiring from the territories or from Inuit Nunangat. They get hired. As soon as they become permanent employees 6 months later, they're moving south and still working at the mine. So take Voisey's Bay, for example. Five days a week, there's a charter flight that starts in St. John's and goes all points north. Well, what's happening is Inuit youth from Nunatsiavut are getting jobs and then leaving the community, but still working in Voisey's Bay because they want their own home, because they want access to adequate health care. Those two things were the biggest impacts in my research of why youth are leaving. So if you want to look at some statistics, which are very hard to get, over 25% of youth between the ages of 15 and 39 left the community of Nain in the last 5 years. That's not a sustainable trend. So we talk about the investments in housing, which the current government is, and of course in partnership with Natan Obed at ITK, they're doing some great movement with housing. But even recently, a report said that even with the current investment levels, it's still not meeting the human rights violations that housing has had over the last 50, 60 years. So getting youth, seeing the opportunity is that early engagement, trying to keep them in the community, but also providing them with equitable opportunities in the community is key. But if we don't have that social infrastructure, which we talked about for hours these past few days, you're in a tough spot. And I would point you to a recent Conference Board of Canada report, which we gave some statistics about the number of youth leaving the territories and working and living in the south and working back. But when those mines are closed, guess what? They're staying south and they're not coming back. So there's so many things to that question, and there's so many thoughts that go through my head because I see the research, I've done the research, I lived the experience, I lived it all my entire life. And for me to go back home right now, that's a tough thing to do, is to bring my daughter back home to where we would not have adequate housing, where we would not have access to suitable health care for her needs right now. There's many families and many Inuit and Indigenous peoples that are in my shoes. So it's quite tough, but again, the early engagement of youth, the involvement, paying them,
not being a burden on them, not adversely impacting them while trying to do the right thing. I think this is critical.
It drives me wild when internships don't pay, you know, and it's absolutely a huge equity issue, because it means that only those who can afford to basically work and not get paid can take advantage of those. And that, you know, is just fundamentally unfair, I think, in all of society, but it's even more of an issue, you know, with our Indigenous youth. So, Max, you've benefited from a paid internship, which is absolutely, you know, important and necessary, and expands your networks, expands your work experience. So, you know, you've looked at probably other options, and a paid internship was, you know, not only necessary, but also sort of speaks to, you know, if they really care about my time and they really, you know, want to invest in me, they'll pay me. So do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So it's actually, I think, pretty common even down south for all internships essentially to be paid at major companies. So it comes as really a surprise that a lot of these internships that Indigenous people are taking might not even be paid or barely compensated, as we heard from Indigenous gift cards. But another topic that I find important as well, that I think we touched upon a little bit here, where like there are such good programs like Blaine is doing and that like Kurt took involvement in, but like Kurt said, actually finding the Indigenous youth to take this opportunity could be a challenge as well, right? I think somebody told you about the opportunity, and many of the Indigenous opportunities that I took part in as well. It wasn't me that found those naturally. It was people like my mother who found them somewhere and then came and told me about it and told me, hey, you should apply for this, right? Or you should try pursuing this opportunity. So another issue here is actually finding that youth to take advantage of that opportunity, right? So you have to really target the youth, go speak to the youth themselves and make them aware of this opportunity, not just have that opportunity available, but might not be taken advantage of by many youth.
So it also reminds me about how much time Jasmine and her classmates spent trying to find, you know, all that extra sponsorship funding just to be able to pay for your living costs, because going to school in the north, you know, there was a policy by one of our Inuit organizations that provides post-secondary funding, but wouldn't actually provide, you know, the cost to rent or mortgage or living expenses, because the policy is living away allowance. But, you know, staying in your home community to do that education means that you get to have the support of your family and your friends and your community network. You get to be part of, you know, all the things that are happening in the political development. You know, Jasmine, could you speak maybe and share, you know, why did you do a program like law in Iqaluit, even though it was a tremendous cost burden to you and it would have been easier financially for you to leave the territory? And how you had to try to make ends meet, you know, pay your bills during those 4 or 5 years of going to law school.
Yeah, so like Madeleine said, one of our primary major funders for Indigenous education, which they receive their funding from the feds, is not available to people who attend school in their home community. And that's based on a policy decision, based on an assumption that students are all young people, that they can live at home with their parents, and therefore that they have reduced living expenses if they're going to school at home. But what we know is actually true is that a majority of Indigenous post-secondary students are actually parents, often going to school as mature students later in life, often have, you know, families and other obligations, and that the cost of living in the north is significantly higher than in the south. So whereas if I had been able to either live in residence, which I was also precluded from doing because I owned a home, my rent might have been, you know, a couple $100, maybe $500. I had a mortgage in excess of $3,000 a month. Plus I had 2 children who were in daycare when I started school. My daughter was 1 and my son was 3. That's an additional $2,000 a month. And so it was a difficult decision, but it was really important to me that I be able to do my education at home. One, specifically to participate in a program that included Inuit-specific culture, Inuit-specific and Nunavut-specific content, because that's where I'm going to be living and practicing. So of course I want to be part of a program that helps me to learn the law from my own perspective and from a perspective that's meaningful to my community and my people. As well, I don't have the networks to be able to do that in Ottawa or Saskatchewan or Toronto. I have 2 small children. I need to be close to family. I need to be close to people I know so that they can help me with my children. And so I wound up having to work while I was in school. I worked as a correctional caseworker at the women's facility, and I worked anywhere from 12 to 30 hours a week to try to make ends meet on top of my coursework. It was very challenging, and it also meant that then I didn't have the same time as some of my classmates to apply for things like scholarships, which each require, an essay plus numerous letters of support, and that's just a gamble that I didn't have the luxury of taking, because I don't know if I'm going to win that. I don't know if I'm going to qualify, but I know if I go to work, I'm going to get a paycheck in 2 weeks. So, and now I've lost my train of thought. It was a really difficult time, but it was invaluable to be able to do that at home. And I also just really want to name that there is such strength in being able to learn from a place of comfort, from a place of familiarity. We know that learning really stretches your mind. It's an intimidating process. It changes the way that you think. It changes your life. And it made a big impact to be able to do that at home, to be able to do that with peers who looked like me, who spoke the same languages as me, who understood my experience. Whereas, if I came to U of T, I might be the only person from Nunavut in that entire school, let alone within the College of Law. And so having that strength, and then as well, it made a big impact to have all of our professors be on our land and to come to our house. That changes the dynamics in the classroom. Whereas we're used to a very hierarchical education system, this allowed an opportunity for bi-directional learning. So those professors are also going home having a richer experience and understanding of the legal landscape in the North because of their time and experience with us. We were also able to teach them while learning ourselves. So it was an incredible experience. I highly recommend that model. And if anybody's interested in doing like a comparative study on that model, please talk to me. But yeah, it was financially very, very difficult, and I'm going to be paying for that for a very long time, despite the fact that we have all of these programs that are supposed to be designed to make that easier for people like me to do.
And I actually was the graduate of the very first law program taught in Nunavut, and what really upsets me is that the first program was designed to actually recognizing that we were older with families, is that we got paid to go to school, which covered our living expenses. And then to find out that the second sort of like program, which my daughter attended, they decided that that should not be the case. And the level of sort of like inherent, bias or discrimination and, just effectively not providing that same level of adequate support to ensure success. Really, really just, I just couldn't believe that there was that sort of mindset when we have the organizations with millions of dollars to provide that support, and yet was kind of undermining it. But I do want to speak, and I will promise I get to you, Blaine, is that because also, Kurt, the program that you did, I understand, because it gets delivered quite regularly, it's these cohorts. The approach is that we recognize certain employers, certain, is that there's a comfort level of, you know, being with people that understand who you are and where you're from and share a culture. And so sometimes that cohort is delivered in Nunavut with some challenges, and biases. But there's also where heavy machinery, people do have to come down, and then you get to actually study, with people from your own culture. And where that cohort has been particularly successful in the heavy machinery program is sometimes a gender cohort, so women specific, even a buddy system that just sort of like recognizes that, okay, it's going to be hard, but if I have that, not only that sort of group of people that I, come from where I am, or leads to much, much higher successes. So Blaine, I'm curious, in your territory, in your region, what levels of sort of support are done to sort of try to ensure success and reduce some of the barriers? Or is that what your, work is with the other nations as you develop your plan?
Well, for MLTC, for instance, in 2019, there was a suicide crisis on one of the reserves. So in response, we developed a youth survey targeting grade 5 to grade 12. And just finding out, it was anonymous, so just finding out what the issues were, what does the community need? How do you get kids to stay in school? What facilities need the community needs? Some of those communities don't even have a good youth center. And, you're finding out these issues, and the goal was to get the issues from the youth and then design social programs based on that. And then COVID kind of happened, so we're trying to do virtual wellness programs and different things like that. But in terms of work and economic development, logging industry and oil and gas play a big role in the communities. A lot of people will go travel and do I'd work in those industries. So MLTC has a training program, at least they used to, of having similar work placements in the logging industry, in oil and gas in Fort McMurray, in the mining with uranium. So there is that aspect of it as well.
So we have about 15 minutes, open up the floor for some questions. Because we have an amazing, group of individuals with different life trajectories and are contributing, to their own development, part of course, our family units and our community in our region. And so, are there any questions? Yes, please. And if you don't mind, I've been sort of squirming for about 15 minutes, so I'll let you ask your question and one of the youth sort of answer, but I need a 2-minute break for myself.
You're excused. My name is Monique Onger. I work for GEM Geo North program in the Geological Survey. And we've been working on trying to build capacity for geoscience training in the north. And I've heard you talk about, Matthew, you had mentioned at Valet, the program, grades 10, 11, 12. I was actually at Valet in September and they spoke to us about that program that they have. I also have a group of advisors from across Northern Canada that I work with, and they have said that by the time kids get to grade 10, it's too late. And looking at initiatives for younger, like the kids in grade 6, the 12-year-olds, the 13-year-olds, do any of you have any suggestions or ideas or programs that perhaps have worked that you were aware of to capture youth at that younger age and captivate them on the possibilities of career opportunities in the north?
I guess for me, it's funny you say that because we started at grade 10 and some of the feedback we were getting was, the grade 10s, they already know what they're doing. And I think back, I'm like, I still don't know what I'm doing, but they already had like a plan to go. And for several folks, we were able to get them to come into the mining industry and whatnot. For your particular program, it sounds like you want to get them interested at a very young age so that they'll pick those studies. I don't know how it works in other provinces, but in Newfoundland, Labrador, you kind of got to pick your sciences at grade 10 and follow through to grade 11 and 12. So getting them interested at the grade 9 and below stage was kind of important for us that we were working on. But with COVID, all those in-person programs kind of got put on hold for a bit. They're back on now. But it's seeing people having those role models, that is super important. Like you say geoscience to me, I'm not a science person. You say that to me, that can mean 1,000 different things. But really showing practically what that looks like in communities, what they'll be doing practically hands-on. We're hands-on people. So not talking about it, showing what it is, getting into the communities, having those conversations, spending time there. Teachers are your greatest asset there because they're living in the communities, so partnering with them. Of course, teachers already have an immense burden, especially in the north. They're guidance counselors, they're crisis response, they're sports team coaches, they're everything. So adding that on might be difficult, but that's the level of work that goes into it. There's a significant amount of work. If you have these goals that you want to hit, you want to get youth interested, it's not an open house one time. It is a continuously embedding that into their head that this is an opportunity for them and whatnot. There's so many programs targeting youth that don't get filled, that are not successful, whatever the case is, and oftentimes it comes down to a lot of good intent behind it, but the amount of work that needs to go into it is quite significant. It sounds like you guys are doing the right things. You got the advisors up north and whatnot, but I tell folks, think about what is successful in the south and how you would do it in the south, and then put 10 times more effort into it, and that's how you'll be successful in the north. And that scares a hell of a lot of people, but it's reality.
And that also means the money.
Money.
Because it's going to cost more money. But then when I think about sort of like what we're doing in our territory, in our communities, is that we support a big transient population. So relocation in, they stay 2-3 years, they relocate out, and instead of actually putting that level of investment into our people. So I know that in Greenland, which had a really big problem with sort of, a youth out migration, one of the, things that helped sort of turn some of that around is the university. And, an aggressive local hire policy, because we know in our own home communities is that you can apply for one of those jobs, and sometimes they say there's no housing with it, and our people in our own communities need housing. Or if there is housing, is that we apply for those jobs and they're like, well, you're a local hire, so housing is not available to you. And you're like, and so there are sort of policy shifts that, need to actually be done that recognize that, where we're investing and where it actually is having, negative impact or not supporting actually our youth. Yes.
A comment about how we measure success. So I was really interested to hear about the ILDP, which is run through Pilamaxivik House at Canmore. But your experience would probably be marked as a non-success because you didn't end up taking a job within the federal government. So I'm really interested in this idea of how we define success, because it sounds to me that you still had a positive experience in the program, that it helped clarify your career goals, and that it was a fortunate step towards it. But when we're measuring success of programs like that, because you ultimately did not go and work for the federal government, it would probably be considered more as a non-success than a success. So I think this is just a comment that I think we really need to look at it more closely about how we defining success when we implement these programs. Do maybe more surveying after the fact as to what participants' experience was in the program. And then this is me on a personal note and not with my Government of Canada hat, but I am the first one of the first students of the University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George. 100% support the idea that if you have a university at home, you are going to have more students attend. You're going to have mature students go back to school who never had the opportunity to go to school in the first place. So on a personal note, a university represents a transformative change within a generation. And you see that all across northern BC with UNBC. And I was there back in '94 as one of the first students through that university. And it can be just transformative. So all the power to you trying to build a northern university. Thank you.
So speaking on how you measure success. So I was one of the graduates of the first law program, but because I don't practice law, I was deemed a failure. Even though I went on to become mayor for 2 terms, even though I'm the chair of the Legal Services Board, which provides legal aid to the territory. And so, no, we need to measure success very differently in our communities. Getting work experience, expanding our network, knowing, where we want to work and where we don't want to work doesn't mean that we are failures. And so absolutely, and the other thing that I heard from this group is if you want to know how to support youth, ask the youth, include the youth. It needs to be youth-driven. And the fact, we need to measure their success based on their terms is, I think, the overwhelming sort of sense. And everyone in this room, the jobs that you started when you were a teenager in your early 20s, you're probably not even working in the same field. And we understand that it's okay to have different careers and different trajectories. You'll come across new opportunities, from a single event, from a single conversation. And that the goal, ultimately, is to support our people in whichever ways that we know that they need the support and want, and so that they can be as unique and successful in their own field. So I want to take the time and absolutely thank and celebrate, the youth that have come to this conference and are making valuable contribution in their own lives, in the lives of their families, the lives of our community, and the lives of our regions, but also they're contributing, to the overall success of Canada. So thank you.
Just my own personal thoughts, and I'm listening to all of you, and you're all so extremely bright and articulate, optimistic, passionate, and it makes me then reflect on all the conversations we've been having, for the last 2 days, and I can't help but think the sooner you guys all get in power, the world is going to be a better place. So we need to usher you right in, and because I think you guys have a much better hold on a better future than a bunch of us old people.
And maybe I'll just, add one comment, because I've heard youth say it to me many, many times, is that they're a little tired of saying the youth is our future, because their youth is in now. Now, stop, sort of, yes, they will absolutely participate in the future, but we need to support them now for all the sort of wonderful, being able to take advantage of all the opportunities, and without having to spend a ton of time not knowing what's out there because it's not well communicated, and not spending a ton of time, filling in, applications that are way too long, and them doing post reports that are way too long. We need to simplify it.
Let's put them in power now.
Yeah, put them in power now.
Okay, I'm in. Seriously, thank you all. Thank you guys.